2, 1. You are alive. Hey, here we are again. He's gonna say, come on,
TikTok.
say.
TikTok. 7 o'clock. Time to rock. Here
I,
at the corner.
I told you he was gonna say he cannot help
He's
himself. I'm
prophetic.
telling you,
He's
man.
prophetic. He's
But
not pathetic. He is prophetic. And he knew
actually,
I was going to say that.
actually, it's also synthetic.
Synthetic? It's
Yeah.
not real?
But we have something real for you today. And this is real life. I mean, this is a story that could have been drawn out of any corner in America. And when you hear it, you're going to say, "I remember that happened to this guy over there." Just watch. It's
Yeah.
gonna be amazing. So come on.
Some double crossing going on here today.
Yeah.
Some double
All
crossing.
in your chair. Grab
Are you going to be
yourself
sharing on your
a glass
phone
of
there?
orange juice and let's do this.
Watch party?
Oh yes.
Speaking of watch parties, today, most people think of it as Halloween or Halloween evening. I think because tomorrow is traditionally in the broader church considered All Saints Day. But today is a day where we also remember a renewal movement that happened in church. You know what? Just over 500 years ago, right? It was with Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the door of the church in the Wittenberg. He started a renewal movement in the church of which we are a part. Called
And even though Martin Luther, he started this, you know, as a Catholic priest trying to do the right thing.
Yep.
He wanted to excite the Lord to reveal to the world that the world was being broken by a few people. He didn't understand exactly at the moment the depth of what he was doing. But guess what? Here we are.
Well, and that's sometimes the little things, the little changes, they
Yes.
can turn into something amazing. And so for Martin Luther, my understanding was, as a priest, he was really convicted of his own sin.
That's right.
And he would actually annoy the other monks as he was walking. Every time he would think of a new sin, he would keep reconfessing over and over and over again because he was so fearful about his own salvation.
Because he believed that there was no way. Based on what he was reading in the Bible, he couldn't understand how he could be saved.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And then so he rediscovered the core teachings of Scripture that right from the very beginning, what we've been talking about for weeks, it's all these characters they're not perfect and they're broken, and yet God calls them into relationship with Him, blesses them to change the world.
I think the midst of their brokenness, God healed them, or God heals us, God put us together like a jigsaw puzzle. Out of the pieces, out of the broken pieces, He assembled them back together into a person that can actually live a life of true peace and of true relationship with God.
And that's the uniqueness of what the Bible teaches and what Jesus is all about, is that we are not, we don't believe that what we do accomplishes our future and gives us peace. Because everything I do, even the best things I try to do have sin in them. And it's like it's kind of like I'm trying to fill a hole, but I'm digging a deeper hole. And Martin Luther was really aware of this. And he started reading what Scripture actually said. He realized he had it upside down. That we're not saved by our works, by what we do, but we're saved by grace. And some of the 5 teachings, we're trying to remember what they are, but in Latin there was sola gratia, which is grace alone, and then sola scriptura, which is the Bible alone, meaning you don't add other traditions. And then there's sola fide, which is by faith alone, meaning we're saved by faith through grace. Hey, Marion.
That's right.
So anybody, actually, maybe we get people to, Christ alone, that's one. How can we forget that?
Look at this. This is
Okay, you can have
this is the meat of the whole thing. Ephesians 2:8. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. It is a gift of God. You have it all right there.
Yeah.
Not a result of works, so that no
Ephesians
one
chapter
can
2.
boast.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it talks about God preparing works for us to do in advance. So what we do is still important, but we're living out of our salvation. We're living out of gratitude and of thanksgiving, not out of fear. Like, oh man, I got to help a bunch of old ladies across the road or whatever. We know we can have peace with God because we are saved by
when
His
you help a lady across the street, you do it out of love, not out of duty
or fear.
or fear.
Right. Oh, I better do
That's
everything right. So anyway, so it's
let's
grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone, Christ alone, and to God be glory alone. That's what the fifth is.
To the glory of God. And if it's not for God's glory, don't bother.
Right. Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Definitely. Let's have fun with
The
this.
Reformation teaching here tonight in the house. Tick,
Oh man, it doesn't come out right.
tick tock.
You know,
It's more than 7 o'clock.
when I
We got to
say it
rock.
comes out wrong, so I'm gonna continue with my here again. All right? Here we are. Now we are on chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. We're getting close to the end, you know.
We're getting close to the end of the beginning,
Yes. Now,
which is
now,
Genesis means
now
beginning.
comes a part of this book which is the most amazing. And we have adventure plus adventure. Tomorrow we're gonna have an adventure
Next week.
which is actually Courtney preached about that a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
If you want to get an advance on next week's text,
It's
go to our Facebook page and Courtney's
not
preaching
this
it up
Sunday, but the previous Sunday.
Sundays ago.
Yes. And
Tamar
you're gonna hear some of
and
it.
Judah.
Yes.
Judah was also in the story. All right. Genesis chapter 37. Here we are. We've gone from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob. He's got 12 sons. And the sins of the father to the third and fourth generation, we see things are going to get a little messed up. And so we call this Joseph and his amazing technicolor.
Man,
Danny thinks it's on the line.
Yes.
She says she laughs at us. She thinks we're silly.
Amen. That's good. That's good because, I want to be silly for Christ. So let's do this.
When I went to church one time, this is when the Green Bay Packers were trying to win the Super Bowl, and this pastor was preaching, he says, I want to be a fool for Christ. He says, see all those Green Bay Packers with cheese on their heads? They can be a fool for Green Bay Packers.
I see those guys
Here we go.
Get that funny hats and that kind of stuff. Hey, you know what?
All right.
I'll get my flag.
She says we're funny. We're funny.
Yes.
What? Funny? Like I'm a clown? Like
I
I amuse you?
Listen.
All right.
If it's for Christ, I'm
All right, here we go.
let's read.
Genesis 37.
Thank you guys. Those that are in there. We appreciate you watching us.
All right.
And that's good. So what about we read the first 3, 4, 5 verses?
Sure. Well, I'll read the first couple. First couple verses. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Now Jacob lived in the land, so Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the third generation, where his father had sojourned in the land of Canaan. So probably referring to Isaac. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Now Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father.
No, it's not like that.
I wanted to stop right there. All right.
Rachel and Leah.
Sort of like their second in command, sort of house.
That's right. Whom they gave to Jacob as wives when they were in competition and to outdo each other in who could give them more babies. And this is
Baby
how
competition.
these two ladies ended up involved in this saga and ended up messed up and mind you.
But their kids were part of the whole family. They were part of the 12 tribes of Israel, right?
Precisely.
So they were definitely part of
the
it.
fourth, yes. And here we have now that Joseph is in the field with these guys that are attending to the sheep. And you notice how to learn the word
Cheap. They're inexpensive.
I'm gonna have to get the hang of that. Because
Man, I only know
don't
one
get it.
language barely, so
Yeah.
you do
The
you know
thing
at
is, I
least
come
three.
from Scotland, and over there we speak English weird. That's the problem. Hey,
You're doing great.
anyways, so
All right.
here is Joseph, and then, oh man, this is bad. Because Joseph here, it says that he was 17 years of age. And that's a bit messy right there because when you look at the genealogy and you look at the breakdown of the years,
You're gonna do the math here, are we?
there is a bit of a complication there with Joseph's age, or either he's 17 or he's older. But the reality is that we are not completely sure based on the because here you have look, there is a generation of Jacob. Joseph, a 17-year-old, was back in the flock with his brother.
Right.
He was a boy
Right.
with the son of his father wives, and Joseph brought a bad report to them and the father. Now, uh, you have to remember that Joseph was born of Jacob when practically together with the others. You know, he was the last of
Right.
the boys, but it was like
Yeah.
like it
So what's
was
it?
14 kids. Sorry, 13, no, 12 kids in a period of like 7, 8 years. It was pretty quick. So if he was 17, the others weren't very far apart from him.
Okay. So what's the point though?
Well,
I
the
don't have
point
what's
the point is coming. I just want to bring this point up so that you are
It's gonna
alert to
come
that
later.
because we're gonna see later how
Okay.
something
Well, I
is
want to make a
said here.
point about this verse. I want to make a point about this verse.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
this is for the future.
Go ahead.
And actually, I can add to that. If you do the math, Isaac was still alive. Think about that. All right, leave that with you. What I wanted to point out was in the structure of Genesis, always helpful to sort of see how things unfold, that you have what's in Hebrew called the Toledoth, or the generations.
That's right.
And we actually have the generations of heaven and earth when Adam and Eve are born, etc. And then there's generations of Abraham, there's Isaac, but now we're getting the generations of Jacob. So this is kind of like the turning of the page. And the chapter before was about the generations of Esau. It gives a bit of his genealogy. So what's following here is telling us it's a new chapter. It's the chapter which includes mostly Joseph and his brothers, but it doesn't really give a genealogy, but tells a story.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's
this is
not
the unfolding of a
necessarily
new chapter.
it's not necessarily in chronological order.
Exactly. Well, that's the point. Right in the chapter, 2 chapters before, it talks about Isaac dying.
That's right.
But technically, when this story begins, Isaac's still alive.
That's right.
So, and that's always good to think about when you're getting a little confused. Sometimes you have to remember it's not like always a linear story. It wraps up sort of a mini story within it, and then it starts telling you it might
This is
sort of
the
back
same
up a bit.
circumstance that we have in Genesis 1 and 2.
Right.
Then in
Yeah.
Genesis 1, we talk about things, and then in Genesis 2, we talk
sort of
about
repeats
other
it again.
things, and we think like, whoa, what happened there? In reality, there is not a chronology in that sequence.
Yeah, because we're trying to. Often the Bible wants to sort of encapsulate one particular idea.
That's
And
right.
it doesn't have to be linear. Okay,
You got it.
so Joseph was a little squealer, and he told on
No,
his.
he was not a squealer.
Joseph was a total squealer, but he pulled on his sort of less valued brothers. But I'm going to call him a squealer. I'm not one for calling names, but like man, Joseph could have handled it. He could have handled it there.
The right guy who could not tolerate the wrong of his brothers and came and brought it before his father.
Man, I'm not going to ever do anything bad.
When you hide these things, you are becoming a part of the problem.
All right.
If you see them doing something wrong and you do not denounce it, you become part of it. You become complicit with the problem.
Well, and actually, Jesus talks about this. I think it's in Matthew 17. It's an often quoted part of Scripture where it says, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there." Jesus says that. But what he's talking about is this idea of discipline. So let's say I have a problem with Jose. Jose is okay. Let's say I'm the problem. I'll be the problem. This situation. I'm
No, it's
stealing.
okay. I can be the
I'm gonna be
problem.
the problem. So I'm stealing cell phones. Jose
No,
sees
you
me.
never do that. Man.
Yeah. Anyway, let's say I'm stealing cell phones. You see me stealing. Now, for you to go to the police would be unrighteous or the church and steal would be unrighteous. What you want to do first, the right way to confront it is to talk to the person.
That's right.
Right? To say, hey, I noticed this is going on, and you want to talk about it. Like, you realize this is not the way you should be. Now, if I ignore him, then the next step, according to Jesus, was to take another witness with you, take someone along, and then the two of people would talk to you. And if that doesn't work, then you might, if I was part of the church, might say, hey, we're going to bring it to the council or elders, or etc. And then that's when Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name.
I agree with you.
Good
And the first
discipline.
and second part with the example, that's
Well, you should call the
simply
police too.
because a person that steals automatically is telling you something. He is going completely counter to what the word teaches.
Right.
And that's a major, not only a major sin, but a major crime. And what the person that steals is automatically someone that does not deserve the consideration that you are stating.
I created a scenario off the top of my head.
But this is the same that's happening with us here.
No. I'm just saying, did he talk to his brothers or go to his dad? He's the valued son, as we'll find out in a second. We can never know.
You know what?
But I'm a little suspicious that he's a little squealy.
If I see, for example, a man that's being unfaithful to his wife, or a woman that's being unfaithful to her husband, or that is falling into that situation, and I have the opportunity to take him out of it, to speak to them about it, and I don't do it, then I have a problem. And if I go and denounce it before talking to them, that's a problem.
Well, and gossip is often a perfect illustration
That's right.
of bad
sinful, yes.
discipline, because like I feel uncomfortable talking to, or you feel uncomfortable talking to me about it, so you talk to other people about what I've been doing. Anyways, he's a squealer. You think he's righteous?
He's a man that has to bring righteousness before his father. That's the right thing to do.
Oh man. Yeah.
Okay, listen.
Squealer.
If you see
Rat.
someone,
It's a rat.
if you see someone doing something completely illegal in your neighborhood, and you know that is damaging society, or damaging with the kids in the neighborhood, or doing something that is causing problem in society, and you don't denounce it, you are participating in the activity.
You're changing the illustration. I'm saying there's no evidence he talked to his brother, so I'm not saying you ignore it.
Oh, now we're talking.
What have we been talking about? I use the illustration of Jesus. You go to the person directly first. You don't go to somebody else.
No.
That's what I say. That's
the
why
Bible
he's a squealer.
doesn't say there is a good chance that he tried, and they mock him, because he said here that they mock him all the time.
Anyways,
all right.
We'll agree.
Now the guys, they were bullying the kid. They were here he says it.
Verse
they
2.
were bullying the kid.
Verse 2. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Bring it down a notch. Bring the volume down. Okay, verse 3. Now Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was squealing. Because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic, which is often called the technicolor dream coat. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. So things are not good in the house of Jacob. Then Joseph had a dream. It's the dream coat. And when he had told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And he said to them, please listen to this dream which I have had. Or let me just finish this section. Please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. All right, double hate.
I don't know about that. Yeah. Well, the very first problem I see here is the favoritism of the story. And he had a good reason. His other sons had messed up on him. I mean, Reuben left his wife with one of his wives. Simeon and Levi ended up messing up a whole tribe in defense of their sister, which justifiable or not, it's problematic and literally disqualify him for the right, disqualify them for the right as firstborn. Now, here you have that the only one left is Judah, and why here, what do you call it? That Jacob is bypassing Judah is not explained, but definitely he his favor fall on Joseph to the point that he even showed his favor in an expressive way by giving him a special coat, a coat that not a hard worker would be wearing. I mean, what they're talking about this coat is a coat that was fancy, that had long
Yeah,
sleeves.
you look more like a ruler
That's right.
or a king than a
Yeah,
shepherd.
yeah. He was raising him up
Well,
above
like,
his,
well,
yeah,
his nose
above
was
his
getting
brother.
a
And
little out of joint there.
it's
So,
pretty obvious all the other brothers that were older, reasonably, were gonna feel
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to see. The brothers are not such nice guys, but
yeah.
yeah, within this dream story, twice we hear that they hate him even more. So there's stuff brewing. Now, again, this comes back to the old story where Jacob loved Rachel more than he loved Leah.
Yeah, yeah.
And Leah herself struggled with that and tried to prove herself with these children she was having. Um, and yeah, and then of course Rachel has died at this point. So yeah, you could create some imbalance there. But I think again Jacob is showing his preferential treatment of his children, which is not righteous in my opinion.
Yeah.
But why did so they Joseph gets this dream and he shares with them. He seems a little bit what's the word, naive too. Like he's just like God,
I
like how
think
this is going to land
I think
as a future ruler, which is looking ahead.
I think there was a bit of entitlement there caused by his father.
Yeah,
And that
he's
brought
already
a bit of
wearing.
pride on John.
Think about what he's wearing.
Yeah.
He's wearing a kingly robe,
Yeah.
and then he's saying, "Oh, I had this amazing dream. I'm excited about it. I get to be king over you."
I am me, and you guys are my subjects. I mean,
Why don't you like that? What's
what's wrong
what
with
did I
you
say?
having to kneel to me? I mean, I
All
can't
right.
imagine the reason why they lynched him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, anyway, so then Joseph has another dream, and he still had another dream. It says in verse 9, Genesis 37, and related it to his brothers. Interesting. He's telling his brothers again.
Mhm.
Lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. He related it to his father and to his brothers. So he's telling his brothers, then he's telling his father, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream
What's
that you
your
have had?
problem?
Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the same in mind. I don't know what yours
And that's
says there.
important, the last little word in there. Because uh, Jacob was not ignorant that those dreams had a certain significance. And perhaps this is, even though he was, I wouldn't call it upset, but he was, he saw this as a bit of arrogance from Joseph's part. However, like he says here, he kept it in his mind. And this is important to keep in mind. we're gonna see later why this takes place. Unfortunately, that's not happening in this chapter, but we will get there if God allows it.
Yeah, yeah. So he's had these two dreams, and now his brothers are jealous of him. They hate him. It's just not going good for him. Looking towards the future. What else do you want to say about it? It is kind of interesting. He says, "Shall I and your mother?" I never really noticed that before. Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow down? Now, Joseph's mother was actually already dead.
That's
So,
right. So
so
he
is it
may have meant it
symbolically?
in a symbolic way
Hmm.
because according to the chronology here, there's no way that
Hmm.
Rachel would have been alive at this
All right.
point.
All right. Enough with
Yeah.
dreams. Enough with setting up. But Joseph, we've heard his name before. He hasn't really been part of the story, but he's coming in technicolor blazing into the story of the
Yeah,
book of
yeah, and
Genesis. And
he's
he's
showing
back.
off. I mean, he's like, okay, I'm your king, you're gonna bow to me, and this is what he's saying in short. And he
Well,
doesn't know how or why he's saying this, but he's seeing it in dreams, which of course, from this end, we know that God was telling him those dreams. He didn't even know it himself at that point.
yeah, it for whatever reason it was a vivid dream. It could have been his pride. I think it is. He's a bit naive, and as the story goes on, too, as someone who will really rise to power, he's learning some hard lessons about how to
Wow.
share information. I think
We're gonna see
he's
that in a
learning in the
couple of
hardest
chapters, you
possible
know.
way. All right, verse 12. You want to read that?
Yeah. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in the Asheri. You remember Jesse, no? We're gonna say something about that. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." Sorry. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. That's interesting. Quite.
Yeah, this is it's been an interesting journey going through the book of Genesis, and I'm actually preaching this Sunday on John chapter 4,
Mm.
where Jesus meets someone right in the same place. But Shechem is kind of in the middle of the
well
mount,
of
the
Jacob, Jacob's well, yeah.
yeah. So Shechem is kind of in the middle, south of the sea. If you're looking from over here, you got the Sea of Galilee, and then there's a mountain range sort of south and west. And right to the middle of the mountain range is a trail from Hebron through the future Jerusalem, then ends up in Shechem. And this is actually a very key geographical point. You can look it up online, where just like Jerusalem, rivers sort of begin from Jerusalem, they also begin from Shechem. And from there, there's all kinds of springs. And so it's much more, especially going to the north, very fertile and very green. And so it makes sense that they would have gone farther north and west and to look for maybe some more pasture land.
Now you have to wonder why, after having to run away from that land, after what they did to that tribe, and I can tell you that for sure this is not something that happened a couple of days after they left. That happened that after a while. However, they are going back to a land that they left behind because God told them to go. And John is right. I mean, the pasture there was fresher, was greener, but they could have found other places. And in fact, we here see how the brothers went to Dothan, which is further north, but the reality is that they weren't supposed to be there because that's not what the father told them to go.
where did the father tell him to go?
To Shechem. Shechem.
He told Joseph to go to Shechem.
Yeah, because that's what he has sent his brothers.
So he had sent them to Shechem. Oh, and they shouldn't have left Shechem, is what you're saying?
No, they should not have left Shechem because that's what the father sent them. But the father should not have sent them there because that's what they left from.
Right. Well, in Shechem, just remember from a couple weeks ago the story of Dinah.
That's right.
You know, after Jacob does a head fake and gets his brother going south, and he ends up in the Shechem area, which is also, anyways, very rich historical areas all the way through the time of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But that was where Dinah was raped, their sister, and they convinced the men to get circumcised, and they killed all the men of the city. So maybe there was nobody there to fight them.
Why
they went back?
That God trouble in that place.
Yeah, they were
couldn't
told.
chase after
They
him.
were told to leave.
It's possible.
So, anyways,
Either way,
it's
they were
interesting
here
that they ended up.
find them there.
Yeah, well, I said they went to pasture their flock. I don't know if there's a
But
direct.
again, we have here, look, we have an appearance. We have a man that the Bible does not explain who this man is. And the man said they have gone away, for I heard them say they have let us go to Dothan. Now, who is this man? Typically, things like that are hard to explain, but in the Christian tradition, we believe that this is a representation and appearance of Jesus. Now, we go to the next section, verse 18. Let us read a little bit of that. What do you think?
That's good.
They say they saw him from afar, and this is what things get speedy.
So Dothan is kind of is a plain,
That's
but
right.
Joseph would have been coming over the mountain range, coming from Shechem.
That's right. So they saw him from afar. They, oh, look at that clown over there. Listen who they came. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Wow. Right there is a big problem. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will come of his dreams. We need to stop the episode. I mean, I'm sure you have to say something about that because this is way.
You're always sure I have something to say. Why is that?
You know what? I'll shoot for
No,
the hit.
no. That's good. I think there seems to be a sense in which, like if somebody says, if I said to you, Jose, I had this dream, I built a rocket ship and I went to the moon, you would just
You're a lunatic.
you're crazy,
You went to the moon,
right? But if I'm playing basketball and this guy's really good and he says, I got a vision, I'm going to be deking around you, I'm going to slam dunk the basketball, I'm going to get irritated because I know he can do it. Because it's real. And I think there's something in these brothers that's stirred up by this vision of their brother ascending.
You think they actually believe that?
Why would they be so? I mean, they said they hate him, but yeah, I mean, it's such an irrational level of hate.
Yeah.
And it says actually here, come let us basically slaughter him is kind of the Hebrew behind it, and then just throw him in a hole. This is and these are cisterns that you would collect water with over the years, and so they're like poisoning the well with the body of their brother. This is pretty crazy.
Not only that, you can tell how to this. I mean, they literally had rotten hearts because this is not just a moment of rage or a moment. This is a planned, premeditated, calculated uh, execution of their brother. This is crazy. By all means, and we see these things happening today. You see in the news sometimes crazy things happening, and you go like, "Whoa!" But it is a reality that harsh as it is, it shows how rotten the heart is. And I'm not saying that every heart is like that, but every heart is capable of getting like that. And that's the whole point.
Well, and behind it, um, behind murder, I mean, you have to see the work of the evil one, right?
Of course.
There's God has communicated His plan. I mean, God's not really been talked about in this chapter, but this is, as we find out later, is a vision that God has given to Joseph about his future, and Satan wants to kind of step in the way. And so often we see in Scripture, you think, oh man, this is so disastrous. God was going to do this, and now this horrible thing has happened. Exclusively on the cross. But then God, especially we learn from the story of Joseph, where God, you intended for evil, God will use for good. But there's this murderous desire. So they see it's very dramatic. I mean, you can see Joseph. They could see him from a distance, probably just wearing that fluorescent orange, fancy looking coat, and the time it takes him to walk towards them. They're having this whole conversation about murder, and he probably see him. They're together. They're talking. I wonder what they're talking about. You can imagine Joseph getting closer and closer. And
something. You remember how the Pharisees wanted to take Jesus, and so many times they fasted and they planned it, and they were looking for the right opportunity. I mean, this is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
The heart is a very and and this is why the Bible says clearly the heart is deceitful. It's full of evil, and a person could have an apparently clean heart, but it's easy to see how anybody is capable of anything. We have to consider that I don't have murder in my heart, and probably most people out there don't have murder in their heart. But there are circumstances in which a person could get to that point, and that's horrible. But it's a harsh reality that we have to accept. Here we see with Joseph, we saw it with the Pharisees with Jesus, how they plotted and not one, not twice, but several times to kill him, eventually bring him to the cross. And we see constantly in the news how this guy, he did this, he planned that. The other day I saw this guy that he plotted to murder his wife, his kids, and his stepmother. And he did it, and now he's going to jail for forever.
All right. So, but one of the things I would add to that is that you might think, well, that is such an extravagant story. This here, the one that Jose cited. But Jesus actually talked about the idea of murder. He said, "You have heard it said that you shall not kill," and most people, have been able to avoid murder. But then Jesus said, "But if you hate someone in your heart, it's as if you committed murder. As if you've heard it said." Jesus said, "Do not commit adultery," and I've been able to avoid that. But then Jesus said, "If you look at a woman, continue a woman lustfully in your heart, you have committed adultery."
You might not have gone to the practice of it,
but
in
it's
your imagination.
It's a stain. Sin is not just the action; it is what happens and what's being worked on in our hearts. And these brothers, long before they plot to actually physically kill him, according to Jesus, with their hatred to him, they have already crossed the line. Not that everyone you hate you will kill, but the point is the sin that against the commandment against murder is pointing not just to that act, but to the deepest recesses of the heart, where you don't love someone. In fact, you wish for something bad to happen. And that's where these brothers are at. And they bring it all the way to its conclusion. But in verse 21, we find one of the brothers steps in. Again, the brother, Joseph still walking, and this is all happening. Then Reuben heard this, and he rescued him out of their hands and said, "Let us not take his life." When it says he rescued him out of their hands, you think that's sort of he rescued the idea of him out, or did they already have Joseph grabbed and they're ready to kill him? It says they rescued him out of their hands. Could that mean more? He talked them out of it. You think they physically had him already? Okay,
And
so
he said,
so they're
well, we cannot do this.
so they heard this. I always thought it was more he's still trying to talk them out of it. No, he's not there in verse 23. He's not there yet. So in verse 21, he's actually just talking them out. So he's trying to rescue them.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Why don't you read
Sorry,
it?
we have to. So Reuben heard this and rescued him or this plan out of their hands. Said, "Let us not take his life." Reuben further said, "Shed no blood." Is the demand. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness. So they're already standing over the pit. They're planning. They're already visualizing his body being dead in the pit. Into this pit that is in this wilderness. But do not lay hands on him, and that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. So he's got his own internal dialogue. I'll always throw him in the pit, but I'll pull him out later. So verse 23. So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic. That's an action. The very colored tunic that was on him. And they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it.
Yeah. One thing that's clear here. Reuben, it's hard to read his reaction to this situation. And we realize that here he sounds saved that Joseph's life by intervening this way. But the right thing to do was, and now that this is not happening, he was the elder, he was the firstborn, and he was the one who was supposed to take lead and say, this is not going to take place, at least not in my watch. However, instead of saying, no, 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 I mean, did he act in fear? Did he want to please his brothers, but protect the boy? I mean, one way or another, if he got away with it, they would discover that he did it when he brought the kid back to his father.
Yeah.
So obviously, he was not minding the consequences, the later consequences of what he was trying to do. He was just trying to save the boy at that point.
Yeah, which was commendable.
Yeah,
It was commendable.
absolutely.
We don't really know. I mean, here he's got, then it's 10 brothers against him. So there could be two bodies at the bottom of that well. Now, you think everybody's moving a little closer to the top? Joseph's gone. The number one son's gone. Who's next? So, anyway, so he seemed to do a good thing. He put him in this pit. And again, I was actually, when I was in the Middle East in the Sinai region, rain would still come in these very desert-like areas, but they would actually put these cisterns to be 20 feet deep, and they would catch the water so they could drink all year. But at this time, which probably tells you that it was in the dry season.
That's right.
Which is why they're anointed built in where it was the grassy bed. All right. So then he puts him in this pit. His coat is gone. He's been stripped of his super son status. Verse 25.
Listen to that.
Okay. Then they sat down to eat a meal, and as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead. If you look at the line of the valleys, you'll see that it runs there. Well, I'm saying something right now. Don't you hear me? The caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh on their way to bring them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it us for us to?"
Because what I wanted to say is, what a bunch of smokes. I mean, this guy throw they throw his brother in the pit, and then they sat down to it. I can imagine these kids in there, they're 17 years old. I mean, at the account of the Bible, probably screaming, crying, "Hey, what are you doing? Get me out of here! Come on!"
This is the pits.
And they are just all relaxed, enjoying their food.
Have a snack.
You know, the cry of Joseph here
Egypt.
didn't take much to get to these guys' ears, and I'm sure they will listen.
Yep. Yeah, we're pretty cold hearted.
Yeah.
And then Judah, he thinks, hey, here's some money in this.
But again, I have to realize that, and this is what strikes me interesting, Spurgeon wrote some things about this. How in the case of Jesus, uh, they knew who Jesus was. Here, they, they feared that who Joseph could become. And this is why they acted against him. But there they knew who Jesus was.
Well, this will make the Jesus connection a little bit more clear if we just finish this section.
All right, go ahead.
Right?
Go
So
ahead.
Judas said to his brothers, "What profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." So he's almost using the argument of Reuben.
Yeah.
And his brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt.
Wow.
So there's a bunch of stuff going on here. The Ishmaelites would have been the descendants or the general tribe of
the brother of Isaac. Yeah.
The brother of Isaac.
Sorry.
The older brother of Isaac. Anyways, it's a bit confusing here because it talks about Midianites, which is a different family tribe. But basically, they would trade with this product. I'm not sure where they all came from, the gum and the balm and the myrrh, but Egypt was the mother lode. They were the place where gold came from and where they had so much money to prepare bodies for become mummies.
When people would go there with their stuff to sell it there.
Very light, light things. But yeah, they came from a far distance. They made money by trading them. They were right along the trade route. And here we go. So let's sell them for money too. These guys got money. And they sold him to these Midianites for what was basically the going price for a slave. It was about 20 shekels of silver. Yeah, it was for 30.
But it's pretty much the same. I mean,
it's the same story.
So the value went up.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean,
wow, Jesus was maybe worth more, but it is kind of I'm not saying it's definitive, but I mean you have 12 disciples, 12 tribes. You have Judah and Judas. So yeah, Jesus got sold and betrayed by Judas. Yeah.
But you see, what I was trying to say before is that these people, in the case of Jesus, they have seen. Here, Joseph is talking about dreams. Here, Jesus was teaching about realities. And Jesus was declaring things that they already knew. And accompanying those things that he was saying with actual miracles that were impossible to deny. So these people knew
in the New Testament. Yeah, they knew it.
They
had a sense of that
Jesus
was something.
Jesus was.
And for him to, for this betrayal, for his condemnation, an innocent man, for him to die on the cross, was the work of Satan. And so, I mean, one of the things that we always look for in the Old Testament is how is this? So when Jesus would come, people would recognize this is a story we've heard before.
Yeah.
Not always, like sometimes people think about theology as these topics, right? The sovereignty of God, or of Christology, or soteriology, the study of salvation. But often the Bible is a story that kind of retells itself. You get rumors of what's going to happen. And this is a rumor of what is going to happen. A great leader who would be betrayed. And let's not kid ourselves here. Joseph could have been, in some ways, would have been a grace to him to have been killed and put into the pit instead of sold into human slavery and bondage, where to Egypt would have been greater suffering. Well, and so they have intended something evil, but as the story, this is a good news story, something amazing is going to happen. It should have been they never see him again, that he probably died making bricks on the pyramid, but some redemption is going to come. But again, we connect this to Jesus, right? Who they saw was going to be amazing, who Judas sold him, and the whole community was involved with his death.
No, you have to,
He was not just being sold to slavery, but would be nailed to a cross in which there is no coming back.
you have to, and this is something I'm gonna say later on. One thing that we have to understand here is that because this is all part of God's plan, and we're gonna see how Joseph eventually gets redeemed and how his patient faith, his extraordinary faith, put him atop in the great cloud of men of faith that represent the Bible. I mean, this we can talk about Abraham, we can talk about Enoch, we can talk about Noah, we can talk about all of those guys who were who were examples of faith. But here Joseph topped them all up. And we are going to see that in details later on how
He's a
his,
special dude.
yeah, his patience. I mean, the power of faith in this guy is something that's just, and this is why this is so relevant. And this is why the Bible dedicates 13 verses just to Joseph.
13 chapters.
It's amazing. Sorry, 13 chapters just to Joseph.
Well, and we see in Joseph, you see him at this moment, and you're thinking, okay, God promised that He would bless them, and you're thinking, how is this a blessing? Where is blessing going to come from this? Well, the promise of raising up His people. We're going to see that is going to come to be, and actually by the end of the book, the chapter here, we'll get some rumor of hope. But anyways, he gets sold off for 20 shekels of silver. We are seeing a foreshadowing of the story of Jesus. Now, verse 29, Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. So he tore his garments. He returned to his brother and said, the boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go? And so they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the vari-colored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it's your son's tunic or not.
Yes.
It doesn't say, of course, it didn't say our brother's tunic, but it was, and they're not, of course, saying anything about what they've done. They're being deceptive.
I mean,
They're trying to get him to draw conclusions.
What Ruben did here, and we saw that, we're going to see it further down again with Jacob. It was the typical reaction when something horrible, something horrible has happened. Ruben tore his clothes. He literally, it's typical to find in the Bible how we see these men of the Bible tearing these clothes and literally dressing in that clothes on ashes. That's a tradition in Israel.
It's still a
For
tradition.
men that are
Jewish.
mourning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even today, if I were grieving, you would tear your coat on the right side. One of the sides there's would be especially for the family. So it's still part of giving expression to their grieving. And he said he'd mourned for his son for many days. And then all of his sons and all of his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. Let's do the last verse there. This is a bit coming back to what I'm repeating, that it is interesting that Joseph's, this is the beginning of their whole family ending up in Egypt.
Yeah.
And eventually being enslaved in Egypt. Their selling of their brother into slavery basically becomes this elastic band and ends up pulling the whole family into slavery in Egypt, and points to the coming points to the coming of them leaving the land of Egypt in the book of Exodus, being set free by the blood of the lamb, and here is the blood of a goat that sort of marks their exodus to Egypt, or their entrance into Egypt. So it's a bit of a foreshadowing, I think, of the blood that will be shed for them to leave Egypt
That's
and
right.
then
It becomes a
pointing to
tradition in
the blood of
Israel
Christ.
as a way to atone for their sins. The tradition in the temple to sacrifice a lamb, and they would literally take a goat and they transfer their sin to the goat and send them uh, away. Literally, this is what the word scapegoat is comes from, as a matter of fact. Um, but uh, but in here, what's interesting is that uh, look how their father expresses his pain and how he cries to the point that says, "I'm gonna die in this, and nobody's gonna take me out of this grieving." And that's interesting. But their sons, they don't seem to care. Now, Ruben here, when he was grieving, here he said something, and you mentioned something. This is why I want to clarify for a second that they say they sunk in the God's blood their code, but it doesn't say here that Reuben was part of that, and he was not necessarily in that moment in there when they did that and took the code to the father.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. I mean, because the killing of the goat comes later,
yes,
but Reuben, all he knows is that his brother's gone,
that's right.
and whether he was there with the soaking the blood of the tunic is another thing. But um, this grief of Jacob is inconsolable grief. He says, this is verse 35, right? To him, it's hopeless. Surely I will go down to Sheol. And that doesn't mean hell or heaven. It just means the place of the dead, your
Yeah,
understanding of where you go when you die. He says, I'm going to mourn until they put me in the ground.
yeah. Basically,
There
I'm
is
dead
no
and
hope.
buried already.
There's no hope
That's
for
the
me,
word.
and
Yeah.
there's no hope at all. And you get to this point as a Jewish person later on. You get to this point, and there are times in the story of the Old Testament, certainly for the Jewish people since, where it just seems so hopeless, where it seems like all I'm going to be is just grieving till the day I die. And this point in the story, if you're with Jacob, because as Israel, that's where you are. You're with Israel, whose name is Jacob, and you're in the pit. You're in the pit with Joseph. But then we read the last verse of this chapter, right? She's been sold into slavery. Meanwhile, flashback, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard.
So
And so
things
already
start
from one
getting a
verse,
twist.
the people back home see no hope. The brothers, of course, know that they thought, well, basically sent their brother to death. But the next verse, right away, we find there's hope. Oh,
Yeah.
he's
It's
in
like
the leading official's place,
yeah,
and the hope of what's going to happen is already bubbling.
yeah, pretty much
Thanks, Ron Baker.
the chapter
I
is
lost my hat
closing.
that I took to Montreal, Ron.
Yeah,
You know where it is?
the chapter is closing with a big book here, and it leaves us. It leaves us in tension here, like those movies that say, to be continued.
Yeah, to be continued.
Yeah, because now some interesting stuff is going to happen. But it's interesting how we see here a reflection of the cross in all of this, and how we are able to connect a lot of the circumstances in every step of the way with what happened in Calvary. Um, I, I suggest that those of you who are not familiar with what happened in Calvary, just you can go to the last chapters, for example, Matthew 26 has a good description starting on that chapter 26, 27, and 28. You'll be able to read exactly what happened at the cross. You can go to the book of John, chapter 18, and you'll be able to see what happened in there. And it gets very interesting. And it's important because it speaks to us of a reality that we live today. I mean, Jesus Christ, by all means, the most notable, man that ever existed on earth, and nobody can deny that. I mean, the time is ruled before Jesus and after Jesus. If you ever hear of a name that is known everywhere in the planet, by every religion of the planet, is Jesus Christ. I mean, you should wonder why. Well, the Bible has the answer for that. So I encourage you to have a look, to have a read, and I'm sure you will find the answer, especially if you ask God to open your heart and your mind and let you see, because He will give you an amazing view of what we see here.
Absolutely. We see in these last two verses the foreshadowing of what the 12, the disciples, saw
Mhm.
on Good Friday when they buried their rabbi, their teacher, who they called Lord, in the grave. And they grieved and they wept. Um, and I guess we're done on Facebook. Um, so, yeah, the reminder is with between verse 35 and 36 is the reminder of Jesus that yes, it's Good Friday. We could be in the pit, we could be struggling, but Sunday's coming, Easter is coming, and so there's always hope. Jesus, no matter what, always after death comes resurrection. And so yeah, we'll yeah,
And we give
say
you
back to you.
thanks. And we give you thanks because we don't want to live here in a you know, in a down mood, because this is about joy. It's about the joy of the Lord. So thank you for watching. Let's say goodbye. Why don't you say your prayer and
Right.
we say hasta la
Sorry
vista
for cutting you
until
guys off.
next Thursday. Remember at 7. At 7 on Thursday.
Josie and the Pussycats will be back here next week. Thursday at 7 o'clock when
At
it's
7.
going to be 7 o'clock. TikTok, time to rock. But
And
here
remember on Sunday
on
too.
Sunday here, yeah, about 10:30 we'll be on Facebook Live as well. Of course, you're always welcome to come here for
For
church or
breakfast,
breakfast at 9:30.
9:30.
Hang out together,
Yeah.
and we'd love to see you.
And I
So
insist on telling anyone, if you want to come for breakfast, then you decide I have to go. I'm okay with that.
that's great.
We are welcoming you regardless. Okay? Because
Absolutely.
here we just want to love you today. It's that 7 o'clock this Thursday.
Yeah.
Let's pray.
All right. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for those who've been listening along, Lord. We pray for them. We ask you that these words would not be a couple guys just jibber jabbering about things, but they would be the very words of God, Lord, that you would give dreams, as Joseph did in this story, that point to the ultimate truth, that they are loved by you, no matter who they are and what they've done, and that in you, Lord Jesus, there is hope, that there is life beyond death, and the grave is never the end. It's just a comma pointing to a new life in you. And Lord, we pray for each one, Lord, that they would know that grace and know that love that passes understanding. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. See you next week.
Yeah. Funny.